Hey everyone, today I'm going to be talking to you about this upper receiver here from PWS. This is one of their 7.62 by 39 uppers that'll match up to any mil-spec lower receiver for an AR-15, which is pretty cool. I'll get more into some of those cool features in a minute, but just to give you a quick overview, as you can tell, it's pretty dark out right now. Thankfully, we're in a situation where with daylight savings time, the sun is setting before 5 o'clock p.m. So we're just going to have to make do, and hopefully with my lighting, we're going to be able to see everything that I want to talk about. Now, the first exposure I had to these was actually at TriggerCon earlier this year, a few months ago, where I shot both this, I believe it's a 7.78 inch barrel, I believe, on this one. They also have one that's just over 11 inches for their short barrel versions. And this is, again, or I guess I should just say right off the bat, this is the Mark 107. I believe this is the Mod 2 version. Currently, you can see that it is set up on one of my pistol lowers. However, I've also been shooting it on my little SBR lower with this Strike Industries PDW stock. I was anxious to see how this stock would do with 7.62 by 39, but I'll talk more about that later. But let's go ahead and show you some footage of me shooting this little hog, and then we'll get a little bit more in detail on what is on this upper receiver. So let's go ahead and start from the muzzle, and then we'll work our way back. Up here you can see the PWS proprietary muzzle device. Now this actually does a pretty good job. For all intents and purposes, it does a pretty good job with reducing a lot of the felt muzzle blast for the people around you. Now again, you're shooting a 7.62 by 39 and a barrel under 8 inches, so there's going to be a considerable amount of blast anyway, but I have felt considerably more violent muzzle devices than this if you're not the shooter for the people around you. So it is I guess a little bit of a better thing for if you're around other people. However, it doesn't do a really good job of mitigating that recoil. As you may be able to see, especially when I'm using the pistol brace, when I'm just having it into my cheek, I know I can shoulder it, but to get the eye relief with this 1:6 scope, which I'll talk about in a minute, I have to really just cheek it. And at that point, the muzzle just bounces around a lot when I pull the trigger. A little bit better with the SBR, obviously, but just to let you know about that muzzle device. Now working back, the handguard here comes pretty much right up to where the end of the threads are, which is really nice if you like having those muzzle devices right up tight against the handguard. Now with the handguard, these are, again, a proprietary handguard, and I just recently talked to one of the reps at PWS before doing this review, and as of now, there are not any good, or there's not any aftermarket options that are compatible with the gas system, because this does use a piston gas system, as I'll show you more in a second, and it is a variable gas system. So up in here, not sure how well you'll be able to see that, but there's a little slot with 3 gas position settings. Now the way they advertise it, it's 1 setting for unsuppressed and then 2 suppressed settings. Now personally, with my experimentation, I haven't had a silencer on this thing. However, I did shoot it suppressed at TriggerCon, and it shot very, very nicely with that gas regulated like that. I have found that with the wide open setting, it's been really, really reliable for me. When I get down to the second setting, I start giving up a little bit of reliability, not super bad. Maybe once every couple of magazines I'll have a failure for it to fully cycle, but it does reduce the felt recoil a lot. So if it's just a range toy, that might be something worth playing around with, seeing what gas setting it still feeds reliably. Now that said, again, once you have a silencer on there, then drop it down all the way to that third setting, and you'll probably still be rocking just fine. If you look at the barrel, I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see under this handguard here, but it is a nice heavy profile barrel, which, you know, is a good thing with this length of barrel. You know, to me, it's not a big deal to have a lot of weight in that barrel, and especially with the 7.62 by 39 round being the way it is, having a good heavy profile barrel is something I'm gonna appreciate for this round. Now, moving back, you can see the Pws Upper Receiver. Now, I'm not sure if they're making these in-house or if they have someone making them for them. They do look reminiscent of some other receivers that I've seen, and it does look a little bit weird with the Spikes Tactical lower receiver I have here, but you can see the texturing that goes on here. If you get the complete pistol, again, this is just the upper receiver. If you get the complete pistol or SBR or whatever you want to do, carbine of this, the receivers match a lot better. And you'll notice there is no forward assist. Now, I know forward assists have been debated a lot as to whether they're necessary or not. Very, very infrequently have I ever found myself having to use one organically. And then there's a line of thought that basically says, if something doesn't want to go into the barrel, why try to force it? Why not just get it out there, figure out what's going on, and try to get the gun back in the fight that way? Now, the way the bolt carrier works, a forward assist isn't going to work with it anyway, so to me, it's definitely not a deal breaker not having that forward assist. And with the way this thing's been feeding reliably as it is, again, with that fully open gas setting, I haven't experienced any need, even with steel cased ammo, because everything I've shot has been steel cased out of this, any issues with it wanting to go into the chamber. So just for what that is. Now, you do have a full flat top upper receiver here going into the rail as far as your 1913 rail sections. So I've attached a primary arms ACSS 1:6 scope with the 7.62 by 39 reticle, which is also the 300 blackout reticle. So this I borrowed from my 300 blackout in a American Defense Manufacturing mount. It's been working pretty well. Now, again, the graduations and holdovers for 7.62 by 39 are calibrated for a longer barrel length, so I haven't been able to test it perfectly with this shorter barrel. But that said, it's been a perfectly functional optic to have even on the shorter guy. But you're probably going to get the full benefits of that ACSS reticle once you start bumping up to the barrel lengths, like 16 inches, where you're getting the velocities that this thing is more calibrated for. Now, if you still want to get it, obviously you can just figure out what your additional holdovers are from what's etched on here. But, you know, that's all experimentation you can do. So now that we've talked about the outside of this receiver, let's go ahead, pop it off this lower, and then take a closer look at the components in this upper receiver. And I think there's going to be a lot to like once we start looking at the guts of this upper receiver. So as we look at this lower receiver, you might notice that the BCG is sticking out a little bit, and it kind of just wants to do that naturally. You'll see why that is here in a second. But the first thing you'll notice as you start to pull the BCG out is just the way this gas system works and how they made it work to do a long stroke gas piston with a standard mil-spec AR-15 charging handle. So try to make sure I get this to come out properly. Set the upper receiver aside for right now. But if you look at that, the long stroke gas piston actually feeds through the hole on the charging handle and then just kind of matches up perfectly, and it'll ride in your upper receiver just like that. You still have that ledge up here on the front of the BCG that locks into, so it's still a fully functioning BCG. But what this allows you to do is, instead of having some proprietary charging handle where you're stuck with the way it's configured from the factory, you'll see this is actually a BCM Gunfighter charging handle. This is what ships normally with this upper receiver, but you can replace it with whatever your favorite charging handle is. You want to throw a Raptor Ambi charging handle on there? Go for it. You want to throw a Freedom Bone from AXTS? Go for it. You want to throw a Strike Industries one on there? Go for it. Whatever floats your boat, any standard AR-15 charging handle will work with this, which sets it apart from a lot of other 7.62 by 39 AR-15-esque options that are on the market. Now you may be wondering, well, if it goes through the charging handle, how do I take it apart, or how do I swap the charging handles? So up here, they've kind of come up with a pretty ingenious way of having this long stroke gas piston work. You'll notice that this front piece kind of floats around. Once you get it rotated, you can actually take the piston head off, which will then allow you to feed it back through the charging handle, and now you have your bolt carrier group. Now, again, you may be thinking, well, if that floats off like that, it's going to come off in the gun. That's not the case. Because of the way this rides in the gas tube, there's no way that it's going to have enough freedom inside. Even if it does get rotated, there's not going to be enough room for it to slide all the way off. So not a concern in my opinion. When you start designing proprietary bolt carrier groups like this, you obviously are starting to run into some issues. The AR-15 is not designed to work as a long stroke gas piston. So PWS came up with a lot of really clever fixes, I think, for some of the issues, quote unquote, that may arise with something like this. And it really starts demonstrating to me their attention to detail. So the way I'm going to demonstrate that first is, hopefully you can see this. If you look at the staking on this gas key, it's not a traditional staking because it's not a traditional gas key. So what you can tell though, again, if you can't see it on camera, I'll just take a close-up picture and roll it in. But what they did is they have that channel going in between those two fasteners, and then they staked the fasteners themselves so that the material is going into that channel, which is going to keep those from rotating. And just looking at it, you can tell there's plenty of material that's been staked over, so there is no way that those fasteners are coming out. So again, they found a new way to attach the gas key, and with their attention to detail, they still do a really good job of staking that in there, and that's something I really appreciate. After taking my AR-15 Armorers course through Semper Paratus training, I realized just how many companies get that part wrong. And even though they're totally kind of redesigning, if you will, the AR-15 bolt carrier group, they definitely got that detail right. And to me, that's not just a little thing. One of the other things you may notice about this bolt carrier group as a whole is there's a lot of unnecessary material taken away. There's a lot of cutouts all the way back here, and then you'll notice once you get to the tail end of the bolt carrier, it kind of looks like it bulges out. But what they did is they just kind of took down a lot of the material on the body of the bolt carrier. So what that does is, obviously 7.62 by 39 is a very dirty shooting round. This gives you a lot of area for gunk to start building up before it starts affecting the way that this thing rides in the upper receiver. Now, I should mention that this bolt carrier group has probably 400 rounds through it since the last time I cleaned it, and you know, granted it's a piston system, so it's not going to get as dirty, but even with really dirty steel cased ammo, which is what I've been shooting, it actually looks pretty good. There's not a whole lot of buildup anywhere, but again, even if there were, there's all these little recesses for that carbon to build up in before it starts affecting the way that this thing rides in the bolt carrier, in the upper receiver, which again is a really, really good thing in my opinion. But you'll notice if the way that the bolt carrier group is cut out, I would think, I haven't tried it, but I would think that this is full auto compatible. So if you have a full auto lower, or you're an SOT or something like that, you can probably get one of these to run full auto and it'd probably run just fine. So let me go ahead and disassemble this and get the bolt out, and then talk to you about one of the other things that PWS did. So you'll notice maybe already that the bolt in here is actually spring loaded, which is kind of an interesting thing. So what we're going to go ahead and do, I already took the cotter pin out, get that firing pin out. It looks to me just like a regular AR-15 firing pin. I've run into zero issues with light primer strikes or anything like that, so that's a good thing. Going to rotate the cam pin over and hold the bolt in just so that it stays in position to where we can slide this puppy out. And then we'll take the bolt itself out, and then again, you'll notice a slightly different looking bolt here, and then we have the spring-loaded. Now, I asked PWS why they went with the spring-loaded thing. They just said it was for the ease of maintenance for the end user, and I have no qualms with it. I have no issues with it. It seems to work just fine. One of the things that I noticed about this bolt carrier group is just how easy this thing cleans. So my fingers are obviously dirty because it's all coming off really easily, but let me try to find a particularly dirty patch. So let's see, right there, you can see the carbon buildup right there on the extractor. If I just run my thumb over that, you can see that it's now shiny again. I don't know exactly what material this thing is made out of, but it has a lot of natural lubricity. It's almost like a nickel boron. If I can find what the material is, I'll put that at the bottom of the screen. But basically all it does is it makes it polish up really, really easily. It makes it clean up very, very easily. Honestly, it's one of the easiest cleaning bolts that I've ever used, at least this part. The bolt carrier is obviously a different material, so it takes a little bit more elbow grease, but the bolt itself just cleans up like a dream. Now, one of the concerns I had, and also a concern that I had some people asking about when they knew I was going to be reviewing this, was the way that the bolt face works in your standard mil-spec AR-15 bolt. Obviously, the standard mil-spec AR-15 bolt is not designed for a case that is the size of a 7.62 by 39. So what that means is they typically have to open up that bolt face without being able to enlarge the bolt itself anymore, which can reduce the strength of the bolt face. Sometimes the lugs have broken off on other 7.62 by 39 AR bolts. Extractors have issues. So I actually talked to Primary Weapon Systems about this to see how they got around those issues. What they did is, instead of starting with an AR-15 bolt, a 5.56 AR-15 bolt, they actually started with a 6.5 Grendel and based it off of that. And then they added reinforcements on the parts that you typically will see those part failures. So try to get it so it's not totally reflecting the light back at you, but give you a good look at the way that bolt face looks. To me, it seems like there's plenty of material there, and they said they reinforced the areas around the extractor and in other areas where they've seen other guns fail. So again, they know what they're doing. They clearly have paid attention to what the market's been like and are doing what they can to avoid you running into similar issues. Now, that said, if you know how to disassemble an AR-15 bolt, this bolt is not going to be any different. You know, you just have the little roll pins holding on the extractor and the ejector. So if you want to go super deep into your maintenance, you can definitely do that. But honestly, with the way this thing just wipes clean, I haven't felt the need to totally disassemble this. If I was thousands of rounds in, maybe, but this thing just, again, I can't express to you how easily this thing cleans up. Again, even just my finger running over it, it cleans it up really well. And if I had a patch, it'd be even better because my fingers are obviously already dirty. So obviously it's going to go together in a very similar fashion to your standard AR-15 bolts. So I'm just going to try to do it in real time here. Make sure my extractor is on the correct side. Just going to hold that in, drop my cam pin back into the slot, rotate it back 90 degrees, drop my firing pin in. Had to do that off camera just so I could hold it vertically. Throw the cotter pin back in and make sure that it's going in front of the firing pin, and there we are, good to go, ready to throw it back in. So to throw again it back on, I'm just going to rotate this down, feed it the charging handle through, put this back on, rotate it 90 degrees. Obviously you have to get the charging handle in first just so it can go into its little detent, and then once that lines up, you're good to go. And again, the edge of the bolt carrier group is going to be sticking out just because, again, that bolt is spring loaded. So what I'll typically do is just make sure my pins are out on this SBR lower and put the back end in first. I'll even maybe pop in the rear pin first, and then we're good to go, and everything works as advertised. So now that we've looked at the inside of this thing, I want to talk to you about my overall experience. First of all, like I said earlier, the only ammo I fed through this thing is steel-cased Wolf Tula ammo, and then I've also run some Red Army Standard through it, which you can see has the sealed neck and primer pocket. So theoretically, it'd be a good ammo to store. However, it doesn't like to shoot this ammo very accurately. So with that said, let me just go ahead and talk about the accuracy of this thing. Now, 7.62 by 39, most people's experience with them is with AK-47s. And AK-47s don't exactly have the best reputation for accuracy. Now, my personal experience has differed from that. I've actually had AKs that are easily capable of under 2 inches at 100 yards if I'm doing my part. So I didn't really know what to expect with the AR style 7.62 by 39 uppers. This is the first 7.62 by 39 AR I've ever shot. So again, I didn't know what to expect. However, I have to say, I was really impressed by how accurately this stuff shot just regular steel-cased Wolf ammo between Wolf and Tula, just stuff that I picked up from the bottom of my ammo can, my old ammo can. It just shot it remarkably well. Now again, there's variances in the ammo, so I'd get like 3 or 4 shots in a pretty tight group and then I'd have one flyer, but I think that's more the ammo or me as a shooter than the gun, because when it was shooting consistently, I was easily getting inch to inch and a half groups at 50 yards. Now again, that's going to translate to 2 to 3 inch groups at 100 yards, but for a 7.78 inch barrel, that's pretty darn good. I'm happy. Well, to quote General Welsh, that's pretty darn good. Hopefully my Air Force peeps out there understand that reference. Not super thrilled when I heard him say that our morale was pretty darn good. Anyway, that digression aside. So I can only imagine if it's shooting steel-cased crap ammo, quote-unquote crap ammo, that well, I would imagine if you get some good quality like hunting loads, this thing will probably do just fine with it. So I was really impressed, again, by the accuracy. Now, again, most of what I was shooting was the quote-unquote hollow point wolf ammo. One of the reasons I did that is A, because it was the cheapest I had locally, and I wanted to be able to shoot a lot of rounds through it, which, FYI, I have probably 500 to 600 rounds through this upper now. But I figured if it was going to have trouble feeding anything, it would probably be the hollow points. And as far as the hollow points went, I didn't run into very many issues feeding. The issues I did run into, I think, were all magazine related. So let me talk about that real quick. Now, for this test, most of the magazines I used were ASC mags. That is also what I have available locally. One of the stores that I go into all the time, the Tannerite Sports Outlet, that's what they carry is the ASC mags. So that's what I ran predominantly, and that's what PWS sent them to me with, which, full disclosure, I don't think I mentioned it earlier, I did not pay for this upper. This is a T&E upper, only in for testing, and then I'm going to be sending it back to them very shortly. But they sent the ASC style mags with it, just a bunch of the 30 round magazines. So I shot the ASC ones. I had this C Products one from a friend of mine, a 20 round C Products, and then a 10 round C Products that's been limited down to 5 rounds. Most of the time, the ASC mags worked fine. The only issues I ran into were predominantly with the C Products mags. However, I did notice a couple times with it feeding. Again, I think it's a magazine issue where it would not want to feed out of the chamber, or excuse me, into the chamber. Really early on, actually, the first shots that I had through this, I had maybe 1 or 2 mags where it would do that a couple times, and I think that was just a break-in process. And then it smoothed out really, really well and started running just fine. And then the other day when I was out here shooting it, I started to run into it again. And I think it could just be with the hollow points just kind of getting caught on the lip of the magazine here. Let me see if I can find. So if you look at the lip of the magazine, it's just a solid line. Now, when I talked to them at TriggerCon, the ones that they had little scalloped out areas so the feeding round would not get caught on that lip. However, the magazines that they sent, as well as the magazines I have available locally, are still just that straight line. They don't have that scalloped out area. So if you felt so inclined, you could probably get in there and file out a little scallop to make feeding a little bit more reliable, or just try to figure out where they got a hold of those. Maybe get in contact with PWS, because I would prefer to have the scalloped out mags, and I think pretty much all of those issues are going to go away entirely. The other thing I want to mention about the magazines is, especially the 30 rounders, they are a pain in the ass to load. Now, the 20 rounder and the 10 rounder, I have no issues loading. They load like a dream. And even the 30 rounders, I can get them to like 25 rounds pretty easily, but getting those last 5 rounds is just such an enormous pain. I think it's, again, just because of that extreme curve that's going on and the steel cases not wanting to really work around each other very well. It is a pain to load. Now, that said, again, since I can really only comfortably get these to 25, you could just stock up on a bunch of 20 rounders. You're not dealing with such an extreme curve, especially if you're going into a plate carrier or something like that. And you can just load them a lot easier. You can make that determination for yourself. And in case you're wondering, I did try using the AR-15 Maglula loaders. However, because the diameter of the case is different, it wouldn't work to actually feed the rounds in. They would still get stuck on each other because the Lula isn't pushing that round in enough to get the top round to feed in comfortably. So just throwing that out there. To me, the biggest downside to this is the magazines. But again, there's just little modifications you can make that'll make it easier. And also if you just download it to 25 or just stick to 20 rounders, those are not problems that you're probably going to experience at all. So at this point, I want to try to wrap up my thoughts about this Pws Upper, and I just want to also talk about the price of things that these things come in at. Now, they are not cheap. I will just totally acknowledge that. However, there's a lot of things, especially in the gun industry, where it seems like things are expensive just for the sake of being expensive. This is not the case with this. In my opinion, when you actually look at the build quality, the attention to detail, and some of the features that this thing has, to me, it is totally understandable why these are in the price range that they are. Again, when you consider the quality of this muzzle device up here, the adjustable gas system, which is very easy to adjust even with that rail on there, the accuracy that I've been able to get with this barrel, the fact that you can get it in key mod or M-lock or whatever you want. You even have, it'll be hard to tell, but you even have 1913 sections up here that integrate into the key mod. So if you want to just clamp a light or something like that directly onto the 1913 rail, you can do that. The long stroke gas piston, which keeps it really clean for a 7.62 by 39. The fact that you can still use it on a standard SBR lower. So again, this is a lower that I already had. I already had it SBR'd. I didn't have to go out, buy a new proprietary lower receiver that's only going to work with that upper, that I then have to file a $200 tax stamp on, and then wait months and months and months. This thing just already married onto lowers I already had. The pistol lower I already had, which is a really nice thing. Again, there are 7.62 by 39 systems in AR-15s that you cannot do that with. And continuing on with that, the fact that you can just, it comes with a really nice charging handle right off the bat. But the fact that you can put in whatever your favorite AR-15 charging handle is, that's a really, really cool thing. So again, just to kind of reiterate, this thing is oozing with quality and attention to detail. So I really think that if you can just look past that price tag a little bit and understand why it costs that, I think you'll be doing yourselves a lot of favors if you're looking, if your budget is in that range and you're looking for a 7.62 by 39 AR. Now, again, they do make complete pistols or rifles, so you can get it with their own lower receivers, which, again, they have nice triggers, and again, you're getting what you pay for in those situations. So, again, there's a lot to like there. Now, it's not without its faults. The muzzle blast off this, and I'll show you some lower light footage of me shooting. I can't shoot right now. We're not allowed to shoot after sunset, which, if you can tell, it's well after sunset here. But even in lower light, you get a considerable muzzle blast off this, which makes sense. Again, it's less than 8-inch barrel with 7.62 by 39. So using this scope, when I have a sight picture, I completely lose my sight picture with that muzzle blast. It totally whites out the scope, and then I have to basically reacquire a sight picture again. Now, the longer the barrel you get, the less it's going to be an issue. Again, they make one that's like just under 12 inches, and I believe they also have 16-inch versions. So that's going to reduce that issue there, but something you should be aware of if you want to use this for any sort of practical application, or even like a 3-gun thing or something like that. Now, during the day, obviously it's not going to be as big of an issue, but once that sun starts going down, or if it's an overcast day, you're definitely going to see that muzzle blast. One of the other things to consider is, again, that felt recoil. Now, again, part of that is because of the gas system adjustment. If you can fine tune it with buffer weights and all that, you could probably get it down, and then it's significantly nicer to shoot. But, and again, once you get into the longer barrel lengths, that's probably not going to be an issue. The only other downside, in my opinion, is the magazines. Now, if you wanted it to take AK mags, then you are going to have to switch to the proprietary lower receivers, which means, again, filing another tax stamp if you don't already have one. And it's just, more money to spend, whereas I can just have one AR-15 lower and then throw whatever upper receiver I want onto it. But again, the mags, the market is just waiting for someone to figure out a better way to have an AR-15 style 7.62 by 39 mag. I would gladly pay a little bit more if I got a magazine that was easy to load and also fed reliably, very consistently. Now, if I was going to buy one myself, I probably wouldn't go with the just under 8-inch version if I wanted to use it for any practical purposes, i.e. self-defense or anything like that. I'd probably go with the one that's like 11 and some inches long. Less muzzle blast, a little bit more velocity, probably a little less felt recoil. And I think that would just do a little bit better. If you want just something to play around with the range at, or, and hear me out here, if you want something to scare away intruders, the muzzle blast and the sound off this thing is definitely going to do that. It sounds like you're shooting a much bigger caliber than you are, especially with the muzzle blast, with this muzzle device and the short barrel. If you want something to act like a guard dog and ward people away just by the sound, this is definitely a good way to go. But if you want the extra velocity, you want the little less muzzle blast or anything like that, I personally would recommend going with the slightly longer versions. But again, this is more than serviceable. It still functions and it's still, you know, really good quality. Now, if you don't already have the lower receivers, again, obviously you can get them in the complete configurations, i.e. pistols or rifles. And again, you're getting what you pay for there. Again, really nice triggers, really nice furniture. It looks really good. I believe they're using billet lowers, I think. If I'm incorrect, I'll make a note of that down below. But again, I can just throw whatever AR-15 lower receiver I want on it, and I'm ready to go. So I want to thank PWS for sending me out this upper receiver and letting me get hands-on with it and get some experience with it. Again, if you guys are interested in any sort of thing like this, or if you're interested in 7.62x39 for your AR-15s, PWS is a really good way to look. Again, surprisingly accurate, and it works on your lower receivers. So even if you just are, you know, a preparedness-minded person and you want to be able to run whatever ammo is available in whatever situation you're in, getting at least one 7.62x39 upper and a couple mags, all you got to do, swap uppers. Now you're into a whole new caliber and you can shoot whatever is available to you where you're at. So just something to keep in mind. Now, if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, go ahead and throw those in the comment section down below. I'll be sure to get to you guys as quick as I can. If you do feel so inclined, go ahead and check me out on Patreon. That's how I was able to afford the ammo to run through this gun. The supporters on Patreon made that possible, and they make a lot of stuff possible. I also post exclusive content on there, as well as posting all my videos early on there. So check that out if you do feel so inclined. But with all that said, as always, I hope you're able to get something out of this video, and I really appreciate you watching. So does that feel better with the gas system knocked back?
It does feel better, but you know it doesn't feel good?
Malfunctions?
No. Reaching out too far?
Oh!
That doesn't feel good.
Did you touch the brake?
Burn the fuck out of my finger.
Jeez. Yeah, that'll do it.
Burn yourself?
Oh, yeah. I reached and grabbed this thing. See the smoke coming off of that?
There's fire coming out of there. It was on fire.
Oh, no, that feels great. This stock is actually pretty good.
The ejection is, too.
Is that where they ejected
It's
to?
just, all right there.
Oh,
That's
wow.
impressive.